We are at that exciting point of the evening when we welcome the winners, we welcome the guests, we welcome Silurians for really the most satisfying kind of occasion that I can think of. You know, we're here to honor the very best of our profession and reflect on the purpose of the noble calling, and I do mean noble calling, to which we've all dedicated our lives. I don't have to remind you this election year of the value of our profession, how vitally important it is to America and the world to get the real story, to get it fast, and most important of all, to get it right. Our winners tonight exemplify the ideal. We are honoring the men and women whose submissions were judged the best in print, broadcast, and digital media during 2015. This year, we actually adjusted the categories to be more reflective of the journalistic world we live in, a world where print increasingly shares the stage with online, so some of the old distinctions no longer apply. In addition, as I mentioned, we have two very special awards tonight, and I'll bring these people up to the stage in a minute, but it is going to be my privilege to announce Dan Sforza of New Jersey's Record will receive our 2016 Peter Kihss Award, named for the towering figure whose reputation as a relentless reporter and generous mentor to younger colleagues at the New York Times became legendary. It's the mentoring that we really like to honor here, especially. And Megan Serrill will get the Dennis Duggan Memorial Scholarship Award, named for another journalistic icon, the late Newsday columnist, presented to a student at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism whose work, like Duggan's, focuses on ordinary New Yorkers. First of all, Dan Sforza, come up here, please. Dan. I'm also calling Ralph Blumenthal up, who is one of our co-awards chairmen. Mike Serrill, come on up here too. Mike's going to be over here as we move along. Ralph and Mike co-chaired our awards. They did a fabulous job, and Ralph is going to be giving out the medallions. If you are a medallion winner, when I call your name, you're going to come up to this side, and you'll receive your medallion here. If you are a Merit Award winner, you get a certificate. Come up over here, and you'll receive your award here. We have something for all of our winners to take home. Now, I want to get back to this young man, Dan. Dan became managing editor of The Record in January. He came to the paper straight out of college, a green journalist in training on the news clerk's desk. He worked his way up from there the hard way, in fits and starts, learning as he went, determined to succeed. He would do anything. He ran out on assignments whenever the desk ran out of bodies. He worked in the trenches as a municipal reporter. His career really took off, however, when he was named the paper's junior transportation reporter under the late, great Pat Gilbert. Pat mentored Dan, sharing her strict code of ethics and her knack for turning a hunch into a page one exclusive, as Dan would himself later mentor a generation of prize winners. Pat departed this life way too early at 45, but cancer never dimmed a star, which still burns brightly in Dan's spirited work today. Dan was an exemplary transportation writer. It was Dan who, as transportation editor, was the first to report in a web posting that Captain Sully Sullenberger III was the pilot who landed a distressed plane on the Hudson River in 2009, saving all on board. And as editor, Dan constantly tapped into his cache of knowledge and dispensed it unfailingly to reporters who were trying to make their own mark. Some were beginners, Others were taking on new beats and new roles that posed unique challenges. He took all comers and sought out others who might benefit from his guidance. There was Sean Boberg, a reporter of some accomplishment before he worked with Dan, but who, under Dan's mentoring, became a force of nature when he assumed the Port Authority beat, which Dan had also previously covered. Dan was at Sean's side as his news breaks proliferated. He authored the Time for Some Traffic Problems in Fort Lee email exclusive on the George Washington Bridge lane closings, along with an array of other exposés involving the agency. Sean credited Dan when he accepted a Polk Award last year. There was Rebecca O'Brien, a faculty member at an American boarding school in Jordan who came to the Record with no professional experience as a journalist. Dan was her mentor and her editor as she embarked on a deep dive into the heroin and painkiller epidemic in New Jersey, long before such stories became a popular media topic. What emerged was a 4-part series that was named a Pulitzer finalist for local reporting in 2013, less than 2 years after O'Brien joined the paper. There was Tatiana Schlossberg, who got her first job in journalism at the Record after college, and only months later, with Dan as her editor, was named one of the top rookie journalists of the year by the New Jersey Press Association. She now works at the New York Times. For years, Dan has managed the Record's news side summer interns, some 20 now, maybe 30 of them now, right? Yeah. At least one landed the full-time job at the Record when the internship was up. Others went on to work in various media jobs, including at the AP, NBC News, and the Houston Chronicle. Those are just a few of the standouts who have benefited from Dan's generous spirit and professional expertise. There are many, many more who have asked Dan for advice or who have had him lean over their shoulders to peek at a story as it was taking shape and offer unsolicited help. While it's a bit more difficult to track that kind of impact over time, I can assure you that Dan's efforts and his touch are reflected daily in the bread and butter stories that form the backbone of what a daily news organization should be. And so, Dan, the Society of the Silurians is delighted to present you with the Peter Kihss Award for 2016. Congratulations.
That was incredibly flattering, and I think mostly true. It's true enough for journalism. Let's go with that. But thank you very much. And you know, it was funny when Betsy had called me a month or so ago to tell me about this award, which is really truly an honor. When I take a look at the list of people who have won this in the past, and my name will go next to theirs, it's shocking to me. You know, it's really unbelievable. And then Betsy told me that she wanted me to come up here and talk for 40 or 50 minutes. And I found out tonight she really said like 14 or 15. So we can hold back on that PowerPoint. So we'll move on. I'm going to keep it kind of short. We'll go for about 4 or 5, maybe a little bit longer. And I know enough that we need to get to the awards for the people who are really out on the street, doing the hard work, digging into the stories. And that's really what's important. And I think that really brings me to Peter Kihss. And while I am young in Silurian years, I was even younger when Peter was making his mark So I did some research on him and found out about what a tenacious character he was, and indeed a character, and someone who really looked to fight for those who were ensnared in all kinds of bureaucratic morasses. And he would dig into these housing stories and these other stories. And, legend has it, and I'm sure it's true, that he wrote the main story for the Times on the 1965 blackout by candlelight, which is unbelievable when you think about it. And as a journalist for that long, for almost 50 years, he really became a guiding light to generations of reporters. And I suppose if you're around long enough in this business, and I think that that's an increasingly tough thing to do these days, and you find yourself sometimes really in the uncomfortable position of being sought out for advice. And as someone who's been doing this now for about a quarter century, which is about half of a Peter Kihss career, I still find myself learning new things about it every day. And I think that's one of the great things about journalism. It also is one of the reasons why getting an honor for mentoring young journalists is a little foreign to me. I feel like I'm still learning myself. And I've taught journalism at a state college in New Jersey for 20 years. And I've told all of these writers, either in the classroom or in the newsroom, about how they've dropped commas or buried the lead, or that their context paragraph can't be the second to last graph of a story, which happens more than you think. But I got to thinking, does that really qualify you as a mentor? And my wife, Allison, who is here tonight, would say no, it doesn't. She's a special ed teacher, and she knows what mentoring is about. I would tend to agree. I don't think it does. But I think there are other things that might. And a little bit about myself. I'm a little bit of an atypical journalist. Maybe not for 30 years ago or 40 years ago, but for this generation. I didn't go to J school. I didn't really study journalism in college. I took one or two courses. I was an engineering student, and a bad one. I was horrible. But I was a good drinker, and I like to write, and I can write and drink and still get A's. So that's what I did. Yeah. And not to say that J school's bad. Props on that. So after, give me a second here. I wish that was more than water. After college, I worked for a Korean software company, writing manuals for point-of-sale systems for Korean dry cleaners. This was this guy's business, and that's what I did. And I lasted 6 months. It was terrible. It was awful. I quit, and a few days later, I walked into the offices of the Record. I was wearing shorts and a T-shirt and I think sandals, and I was figuring I could talk my way into a job. And I don't know how many other journalists have done that, but I suspect quite a few. And so I went in, they took me in. I promptly failed their writing test. I was awful at it. But they took pity on me, put me on a clerk's desk where I wrote obituaries, these little one-line or one-paragraph listings that we had at the time. I answered phones, and I dreamt of becoming a reporter. And I didn't really care about anything except proving myself at that time and getting a chance to write good stories, because that's what I like to read, and I figured if I could write good stories, maybe someday someone would read them. I didn't really know about journalism awards. Even after I joined the business in the newsrooms, I didn't have a sense of history about the field or grand institutions like this, But then again, I was just 23 at the time. And as one colleague recently told me, I was apparently very cocky. So it doesn't surprise me that I would have missed all of that, As most young people are, you're involved in yourself, okay? But over the course of the next 10 years, what an education I got. I covered all manner of municipal government meetings. I wrote features and crime stories. I wrote small stories that turned out to be big ones, and big stories. The biggest story in my career that turned out to be really small ones, And I learned so much. I became a general assignment reporter. As Betsy had said, I became a transportation writer. And along the way, I leaned on people who were more experienced, who were better writers, who were better reporters. I watched, I listened to them, I learned from them. Okay? I rarely sought advice from them directly, and I look back now, and that's probably because I was so cocky, But it didn't stop me from absorbing what they were doing, absorbing their knowledge. I saw what worked, and more importantly, what didn't. Betsy had mentioned my colleague Pat, and a couple of quick stories about Pat, and things, ways you can learn things. I remember sitting at our desks, and Pat was looking through an agenda for, I think, the New Jersey Turnpike Authority, and I was buried on it was a listing for them hiring a mortician. And she got curious, like all good journalists. Why is the Turnpike Authority hiring a mortician? Good question. Good question to ask. What she finds out is that they've got thousands of bodies buried in a potter's field alongside the turnpike, just where they want to put an exit to the Secaucus transfer station. So for the next year or so, we worked on these stories, and you learn from experiences like that. Don't overlook things that, look like nothing. Check them out. Ask questions. Pat also taught me how to build momentum in an interview. So much so that at the end of it, your subject feels exhausted and drained. It's a great lesson. And she always went hard after every story. And no matter how small the story was or how insignificant it seemed, she just went after it. She was a hard charger on everything. It's another great lesson. Never stop pursuing something, okay? And the most important one is she always took time to bring me along, okay? She always had time to give me an opinion on a lead or introduce me to a source, okay? Or just spend time, as so many of us do, sharing journalism stories with one another. The value of that is incredible. Okay. As Betsy mentioned, Pat died at 45 more than 10 years ago now. And I think the profession as a whole lost something. It was about that time that our new editor, Deirdre Sykes, was working back then on convincing me to become an editor. I didn't want to. I dragged out my response for months. I wanted to be out on the street in the action, not directing it from behind a desk. I was only 33 at the time, but inevitably I caved. Alice and my wife and I had just had our first child, and I thought a more stable schedule might be just the ticket. You can ask Allison how that has worked out for us. Okay. But over the years, as an editor, I've had the great privilege of working with so many wonderful reporters. And just one, though, has stuck with me that entire time. It's our longtime transportation columnist, John Chakowski. I'm not sure what that says about my mentoring skills or what it says about John, but I'll assume that it means I gave reporters what they needed to move forward in their careers. Over the past few years, I have had staffers leave for bigger and larger papers, the Washington Post, the Journal, the Times, Roll Call, some other publications throughout the nation. And each time was sort of a mixture of sadness and pride watching them go. I was sort of infamous at the paper for not going to farewell parties. Not because I didn't want to see them off, but because I didn't want to see them go. A couple of people who flew the coop are here tonight, or being honored tonight, Rebecca O'Brien and Sean Boberg. Excellent reporters, fantastic people. I look back on the time that we spent together, and I'm troubled by the lack of journalism advice I actually gave you. But I think you remember it differently. And what I remember most of all is providing support to help reporters find their way through a story. Whether it was stories on the heroin epidemic or Bridgegate or police brutality, the reporters talked to me about having a sense of teamwork. And that's really what I'm most proud of. We work together as a team. We pull things together as a team. It's not a boss-reporter relationship. It's getting the story, getting it done as best as we can. In some cases, it would have been quicker and easier if I just told them how to do it, or if I did it myself. But it's not the point. And people learn things by trying. They learn by failing and then trying again. And editors learn more about their reporters by how they handle that process, I think, than anything else. So the stuff I remember is listening to the reporters about what holds them back on a story. And sometimes they've had a dip in their self-confidence, or they're just nervous that their story won't meet expectations. And that happened a lot when Marty Gottlieb was running the paper. Often, it's a personal problem. They just want someone to talk to about what's going on in their life. And that's the one that my wife finds sort of unbelievable, that people will share personal problems with me. I'm the one with the intimidating personality. I have a cold, dark center, it's been said. I speak with varying levels of criticism depending on the time of day. Right? So she just can't imagine someone coming to me for relationship advice or a personal problem or with their fears and anxieties. But really, when you get down to it, those moments, those are the key ones in any relationship and how you handle them. And as an editor, I wonder, can I give this person what they need to get the job done, to find it within themselves, where the answers are that are being obscured by their own anxieties? Can I calm them down enough to realize they have more talent than I ever had, and they just need to embrace it? I confess I've learned more from these moments than I think I've taught. But as I move on to a second half of a career in Peter Kihss time, it's good to reflect a bit, which you don't often do if you're constantly moving forward. So I appreciate lessons that I've learned from our editor, Deirdre Sykes, who couldn't be here tonight. But she taught me stuff about you can't ever throw enough reporters at a story. And patience before making any big decision is truly a virtue. My colleagues, Deborah Weil and Tim Nostrand, have taught me more about editing than I can possibly relate. In particular, Marty Gottlieb, who began his career at the Record 45 years ago. And he finished it there in January, or at least his daily journalism career. And in between, he had stops at these little publications you might know, the Daily News, the Village Voice, and the New York Times. Much of what I need to say about Marty in our relationship, I've told him privately. But publicly I'll say, and I don't know how many of you know Marty, I would imagine quite a few, that spending just 4 years working with one another just was too short. And often I imagine what we could have done if we had another decade or so to do it. As I close this up and get to the real part of the evening, I offer one bit of advice, which I really never do to reporters and editors. I think offering advice sometimes is fraught with problems, and this will likely come back to bite me in some way. But it's fairly simple. Be present, okay? It's simple, but it's tough to accomplish, okay? If you're a reporter, make sure you get to where the stories are, and I'm not just talking about physically, okay? You have to be there physically, sure, but get immersed in that subject, okay? So you really understand it, so you can bring to it the context that your readers deserve. Focus on what your readers need out of the story and work toward that, okay? Don't do drive-by journalism. It's all too easy these days, okay? And we all get caught up on it. I mean, if you have an analytics board in your newsroom, it's very easy to get caught up in that, okay? Don't do it. Get yourself grounded, get yourself informed, do the research, talk to a wide range of people, and be present in your stories. The same advice for editors. Be there for your reporters. I think it's just so much more than just tweaking the writing. I think that's about 10% of the job. Figure out, how to motivate them, what's going on in their lives, learn their idiosyncrasies, allow them to discover how good they can be, okay? Be a leader, be a calming influence for them, be a critic. Don't be afraid to be a critic, and be open to possibilities, be open to learning, and be present, okay? And that's where you're going to find the stories, both on your streets and in your newsrooms, by being there, by being present. And just to wrap it up, I would again like to thank the Silurians for this great honor. Most of all, I would like to say thank you to my wife, Allison, our two kids, Lauren and Charlotte, who are hopefully home asleep at this point, for all of their support and for putting up with the craziness, and it is indeed crazy at times, of having a journalist in the family. So thanks again, folks. I really appreciate it.
One other thing. This thing
right?
tips, yeah, this will go forward. We have a membership card for the Silurians. For Dan, welcome. You're now an honorary
you very
member of the
much.
Silurians. We're
I'm
happy to
very
have you.
excited.
You have earned it. Thank you.